Okay, so next will be our keynote on diffusion of innovation. Michael Connolly, CEO of Sonobi, and Mike Lamb, the Chief Commercial Officer of MediaMath.
Sit?
Okay. We'll sit. We'll start sitting. It is incredibly bright.
And quiet. I expect to hear a little more.
Let's get some
back and forth.
There's a lot of people
energy.
standing. You guys sure you don't want to sit down, or making us nervous over there? Couple things. So tomorrow, John Bond, Lance, Chris Carl, everyone for kind of helping putting this on for us. There's been an incredible amount of work, as you can imagine, going into this, creating the content. So thank you. You guys have been extraordinarily valuable. The other thing I want to say before we get started is today is Veterans Day. I'm kind of sitting/standing, Mike, sorry. There's a couple guys. I was in Iraq with Staff Sergeant Scalzo, Captain Tom Kehoe, and Captain Justin Kennedy, our COO. So happy Veterans Day, guys. Diffusion of innovation. We're talking about a concept that really how anything evolves, any new thing. So in the context of, say, Netflix and Uber, would you say, by a show of hands, were you on the early side? So let's, by a show of hands, who adopted those types of technologies really early, right when they came out, by a show of hands? And how about towards the end of that bell curve, by a show of hands? Yeah, me too. So really, for any new thing, I think that'll be the case. And for RTB, I think we've kind of gotten to the end of that bell curve where every publisher or most publishers are using programmatic in some component of their monetization strategy. What we're talking about today is how do we advance that to a more direct marketplace that has elements of guarantees, traditional sales functions, and more efficient delivery than we see in current programmatic channels. To do that, I want to discuss the evolution of ad serving. So I spoke with Andrew Anker, who started Hotwire.com, and he told me about the very first banner ad that they sold, and it was looked a little bit like that, sadly, in the image. And it would cover the top third of the page, and it wouldn't rotate. It would sit there for the month, and they charged about $10,000 a month for it. And then the ad server came along, and as we evolved the way that we sold inventory, we rotated that creative into units of 1,000, and we sold bundles of 1,000. The buyer evolved sort of around a print digital medium of buying those impressions, buying that media on a CPM basis. That CPM basis became sort of the foundation of the ad server, and the way that it was set up and how it evolved was largely based on the way buyers wanted to buy. And then RTB came along and screwed everything up and started to buy single impressions from single users with the decisions in real time. Mike Lamb, oddly enough, was at the ground floor of that, and we could probably largely thank him for something called a passback, which he'll now explain as far as RTB.
Thank you, and thank you for pointing out this is not my first time in the ad tech rodeo. But first, by the way, let me just, slight non sequitur, say how glad I am to be here personally and on behalf of MediaMath. We at MediaMath work with some of the largest players in the ad ecosystem, the exchanges, the SSPs, the big established players. And we made a decision a year ago very purposefully to do a deep partnership with Sonobi, not at the time one of the largest players on the list. And we did that because we had a strong sense that the supply side needed new tools and new thinking, and that a small, nimble player with a direct connection to scaled demand could go out and could change things. And I was pretty sure we were right. I've been pretty sure we were right, since then. But then sitting here today and hearing the dialogue and hearing both, modern, forward-thinking publishers and folks on the buy side describe what they're doing, I'm very, very sure we're right. So I'm very glad to be here, and thanks, Michael, for the opportunity. So Michael was describing a long journey and innovation and diffusion, and I would have to say personally, it does feel like we've been at this a long time. For me, I took 11 years off of ad tech, and if you had told me when I left X+1 in 2002 that in 11 years we would still be talking about passback, or we would still be talking about trying to convince folks of the advantages of buy-side decisioning, that maybe the marketer in some ways knows best exactly who it is they want to reach. In my naivete, I would have thought that was silly, but a lot of work's been done in the 11 years, and the one thing that really hasn't changed, if you flip ahead one for me, Michael, the one thing that hasn't changed all along is what does the marketer really want out of this? And all of these successive waves of innovation in how media is bought and sold have been about increasingly addressing really the marketer's hierarchy of needs. And clear on the bottom here, scale, if it's not big enough to do, it's not big enough to do, right? And scale plus efficiency together, that gave us sort of ad network 1.0, right? A really efficient way to deliver reach, and we were all glad of it until we realized that it lacked transparency. And then maybe I really, now that I have food and shelter, I want to understand exactly why things are happening and where my media is running. One of the great advantages of RTB is we get to know largely which impressions we're buying and why. And then the great revolution of call it programmatic or ad network 2.0 introduced precision to this dialogue. No, I want to buy my audience. I want to buy either my first-party audience based on CRM data or site visitation data, or I want to use the data that are out there to define exactly who I am after in the way of every great media plan ever written. Eric Picard, who some of you may know, recently joined the firm, has a great line. He says, go read a root media plan. It is like a work of art. It is a detailed, fact-based, wonderful description of who the marketer is trying to reach. And those things go off the pen of somebody at the brand who really knows the business, and they just go into a meat grinder of media buying. And maybe we can get one or two of those dimensions at a time at scale. And we deliver some audience that's a gross approximation of that original portrait and work of art. And so we've made great progress in RTB. I think first-party buying, the true open standards, allow the buy side to decide who they want. And then underneath all of that, and once you have scale and you have efficiency and you know where it's going and you're able to define what you want to buy, then we get to the top of the pyramid. And this is self-actualization, I think, if you're in Maslow's world. But for a marketer, self-actualization means outcomes. What are the actual business results I'm trying to drive? And the rest of this stuff melts away. It's not about what impression or how or what technology did I really drive the ultimate business outcome. And the thing that's exciting about the dialogue today is taking that discipline and applying it to all of the inventory that's available out there in partnership with publishers, really to drive outcomes. And I think that's when this dialogue changes. It probably doesn't complete. It would be equally naive for me to assume that it would be complete, but when we can get on the same side of this thing.
This slide, I've spent the last 8 months calling on publishers and spending a lot of time with the programmatic sales community. And oftentimes I feel like if you're a programmatic salesperson, sometimes your day looks a little bit like this. And if you've ever done a private marketplace deal or are in the business of selling your audience in a direct way, I would suspect you've encountered some frustration throughout that process. It's our oil well slide. The idea here is you've spent an enormous amount of time sort of setting up this deal, setting up this oil well to find out that the audience isn't there, or the deal isn't meaningful or material. And for us, on the sell side, for the publisher, there's the same amount of time to set up each deal. So 15, 20, 25 hours of back and forth. I had the privilege of being on one of those email chains earlier this year. And it's extraordinary, the pain that goes through the setting up one of these deals. And it was said earlier on the agency panel that I think private marketplace deals are being set up without really any expectations on the sell side and on the buy side. One of the reasons, or one of the ways to avoid that inefficient prioritization of manpower is to understand where your audience is, understand the density of that audience, and then be able to convert that into something that could be meaningful. Is this a meaningful and material buy? And you guys have probably seen that on the media buyer side inside of T1 for private marketplace deals.
Oh, yeah. The number of man hours wasted on deals that delivered $100. I mean, you all know the flip side of that pain. I assure you the buying community is just as flummoxed and pained by that.
There's some other data that's very interesting around First Look, and there's been some comments on the publisher panel about delivering JavaScript tags in a higher priority in the ad server. The reality is that if we're going to move to a direct marketplace where we are going to source users in a guaranteed way based on buyer-intended audiences, and let's just say that is the end state, it's very difficult to do that anywhere beyond the first look. Because once that user arrives at the page, we need to source him to that guaranteed component of your ad server at the time of request. Even second look or third look or fourth look will eliminate the ability for the publisher to guarantee that audience. So setting up this paradigm of having a filter at the top of your stack that is designed to source inventory in a guaranteed way is really the only way to accomplish that problem. And as we get down to direct, Remnant 1 and Remnant 2, we see there's an awful lot of those users that have been sourced to either impression-based deals or other direct deals, leaving very few of those valuable users left to source to a direct deal. So aside of having the audience not there, you go through that same process to set up a private marketplace, but it lives somewhere in your remnant, the remnant component of your ad server. And those users have already been sourced. Hence, you cannot get scale against that audience. Hence, it's not a material buy, even if the audience was there. And we have some interesting data around when the audience is there.
Right. I mean, I would say the challenge of this is really, really clear from the buy side. Somebody said to me yesterday, we've pulled an awful lot of fish out of a very small pond because we've done a tremendous amount of innovation really in the last three pieces of this column chart here, where the majority of the audience actually is over on the left-hand side of the page. And so if we are not seeing the users at frequency 1, frequency 2 in the session, we can be losing as much as 70% of the available audience. So really clear, the reach suffers the lower we get in the waterfall. Okay, I think we all know that. Much more motivating for us are some of the stats on the next page. So we're now 6 months into this partnership on an operational scale and buying against these audiences. And so there's some really interesting before and after data on specific publishers, constant set of advertisers and objectives who have cycled through true open RTB. They've done the work of setting up, direct, quote, PMP, and then through Sonobi and others, they've gotten true first look, where we'll talk in a second about what that means from the buy side. And three things that we see on the page, and the numbers down at the bottom are real. The first one, if you just read the left-hand side, boy, first look is expensive. So good job to all of you in properly extracting value. We've had to pay a huge premium in order to vault over that reserved inventory and clear at the same time. And as we should, if you only went as far as the middle of the page and you said, okay, is it worth the trouble? If I take my shallow engagement metrics, even cost per reach or cost per click, God forbid, is it worth the trouble? The case has been very, very marginal. It's extremely marginal on PMP. We largely advise our clients, unless you are supply constrained and you can get incremental inventory, a PMP deal that just sits right on top of OpenRTB is really not doing anything for you. Where it's really been game-changing for us is in cost per action and driving real outcomes, whether these are online outcomes or offline outcomes. And so on average, we've seen CPMs that are 3 to 4 times as high, and we've seen CPAs that are half the total that we had before, right? And so for our marketers, it's an incredibly compelling experience, and there's a bit of a valley. You see it on the right-hand side, that middle chart. There's a bit of a valley of death there. If you started in RTB and thought, okay, I'll dabble in PMP, you might actually conclude that that's a less efficient way to drive outcomes to the business because you haven't quite gotten to the promised land. Now, I was coached. I had to offer some more technical input on how to make this thing work as well. So, Michael, you can tell me if I'm sufficiently technical if you flip ahead. 3 things that we've seen as requirements for success on the buy side. And the first is you have to have dedicated budgets. And look, we MediaMath spend all day talking about what a great learning machine we've built for seeking out high-performance inventory, and that is absolutely true. But in order to make this stuff work, we've had to prime the pump. We've had to force the machine to take a longer look at this inventory than it normally would, because the first thing the machine notices about this inventory is that it's 3 times as expensive. And until those events come in and we're really getting that closed-loop signal at statistical significance, it just looks expensive. And if we leave that to happen through the natural learning processes, it doesn't happen quickly enough, the deal doesn't spend, people get frustrated, the whole thing falls down. So we've had to prime the pump. We've got the proof cases now that we can use with our clients to describe best practice. Do these deals, put separate budget against it, let the results prove themselves out, and then manage the budget and pacing manually. Second on the page, and again, this is clear. The true distinction between, call it PMP and call it premium programmatic has everything to do with where those things really clear. I don't know the pub side stack as well as I should, but it's not where they're trafficked. It's not, what priority they are. It's where does it clear? If I have a strong signal from the demand side willing to pay for this impression, what can it preempt? Am I really going to get the audience I need? Because if at the end I don't clear until after reserved or direct, I'm just effectively a half step before RTB, and the performance isn't there. And then finally, the buyers for whom this works the best are the ones who really have deep business outcomes they're trying to drive. The good news for us is that's all of our buyers, and we are working every day with all of our buyers, including multi-channel retailers, CPG companies, auto companies, financial services, to instrument their deep business outcomes and to be able to measure this advantage. But if you're working on shallow metrics, as I say on the page, God forbid if it's CPC, this is maybe going to be a little confusing to you. So here's what we've learned, and I would say in the last 3 months working with Sonobi, great traction and scale.
A lot of these problems are compound problems that lead to ultimately wrong prioritization inside the ad server. So what we're looking at here is the case study here, the use cases. There were 96,609 signals to the ad server. Each one of those signals came with a $19.69 CPM. Those signals were trumped by a direct deal that was booked to be guaranteed and reserved at a $7.96. What you're looking at here is what you've seen, I think Barry mentioned it earlier, retraining the sales team, sales conflict. The sales team is out there booking revenue against a $7 deal, when meanwhile there's this $20 CPM that wants to spend $2,000 a day, but it won't be able to. That CPM could be $1 million and it'll never serve. And how did we get to prioritizing it in the wrong way? Well, we didn't understand how big of an opportunity it was. We didn't understand the scale of that deal. We didn't understand the density of that audience across our site. And most importantly, we didn't know how to convert that into an impression-based buy that we could book and reserve like we do through a traditional deal. And that's the disconnect between audience. We just kind of have to find out in real time, log into the reporting, and let it settle, where it's very easy to sell 1 million impressions at a very fixed price across certain properties. So the one team, one fight comment from Rick at Conde is it lends itself to this problem right here. Really, it does. So we have to solve those other problems to understand how we should be better prioritizing these deals inside of our ad server. What needs to be done? Well, there's a couple things. There's a long list here, but some of them are understanding how that audience converts into CPMs. If not done consistently by a standard, Brendan spent a lot of time talking about standardization. Standardization, we think, is important, by which the supply side makes their audience available directly to the buy side. The buy side needs to build hooks into this standard in order for it to scale. And that process needs to be standardized from the supply side so that the buy side can then build into that standard to offer those and extend those features and functionality to their buyers.
I'll sign up for a couple things here too, Michael.
Sure.
This is a two-sided issue, like all of these things. And back to what works for us. What works for us is when the buyer understands who they want, they have a point of view about which publishers they can find that audience at, they're willing to make, if not firm commitments, real estimates, be patient, deliver the spend, make sure it's working, close the loop properly. That's how we're able to get to scale.
And the slide there is a picture to associate the $112 million loss for the Mars landing vehicle that failed to use the proper conversion of metric. Hate it when that happens. This is not a meat grinder, although some people internally at Sonobi do not like this design. We're converting people into impressions, people-based marketing. That's what we're moving towards. That's the latest innovation. That is the new way that we want to transact, is on a first-party data as the currency, and we want to guarantee that audience at scale. Translating that audience into impressions. That's the currency our ad server understands. That's the currency our sales team understands. We have to find ways to convert that into something that fits into a system that we're using already. We think that there's 4 pillars to the total solution that creates an efficient direct marketplace. Some of these sit on the buy side, some of them sit on the sell side, but ultimately we think this will consolidate to one platform. You've got the sell side UI where you manage campaigns, prioritize access to audience, understand how audience overlaps, understand the density of the buyer intended audience across your properties. Page level and DFP integration. This is where the tag sits on the page. Every time the page loads, the tag loads. You can think of this as a programmatic ad serving solution, just like your ad server. You would select one of these. You would select one of these to manage your audience, much like you would select one ad server to manage your impressions. That would have a DFP integration via API so that you could signal that ad server, reserve inventory as necessary, convert audience into meaningful units, work in the paradigm of the ad server. And the ad server does what it's excellent at, which is dropping creatives on the page. You have a buy-side UI, which enables hooking into that supply-side standard, creating, managing campaigns. And then what sits at the top is customer-centric media planning. There's some media planning tools out there today, and they're very focused on creating a direct connection with the publisher's inventory and pushing through a 1 million impression buy. We talk about customer-centric media planning as the standard that really needs to evolve there. Rather than automating an older standard, let's add value to the media planning process by understanding where your users are across name publishers and the ad units available to reach those in a guaranteed way. All of these things really need to come together, and we think that the market, most people are working on certain components of this. And for true standardization to occur, we need these 4 pillars to kind of work in harmony and with one another. Do you have any comments on this? I stole this drawing from you the other day.
It's okay. Look, I would just echo what I said before. From our point of view, we're so excited to see real innovation on the supply side in understanding the mechanics and the economics of how to bring inventory to market. And while Google has been reasonably innovative and a great partner in the AdX business, I think, as per Mike Smith, you are all collectively smart not to rely entirely on them for the tools that drive your yield. So we spend all day doing innovation to deliver outcomes to marketers, and our ability to do that is in some ways rate limited by the technical innovation on the sell side. So that's why we're here, and we're here to bring real scale demand to bear against these approaches over time.
Standardization creates less complexity. I think everyone can agree with that, really, in all areas. In digital media, we have a lot of complexities around standardizing all areas of it, but there's a meaningful, willful effort to solve those problems, I think, from both the buy and the sell side. What difference does this make? We think sales teams may be able to sell guaranteed programmatic ad products alongside of their other products simultaneously as one sales team. We have a programmatic sales community, and we have a traditional media sales community that oftentimes aren't working with each other in harmony, making the programmatic sales team very difficult for them to execute in a meaningful way for their publishers. For us, we see the programmatic sales community as a lot like sort of an F-18 pilot compared to a Cessna pilot. They're pushing buttons, so maybe you could argue they're not pilots, but they're systems managers, and there's a more complex suite of technology that they need to engage to get things done, and we think that needs to be spread across the entire sales team. Allows media buyers to discover their audience and negotiate guaranteed access. How many private marketplace deals have been set up for those $100 deals? We've got to find a way for the buyers to understand the density of their audience so they can focus their efforts on things that are going to be meaningful. Yes?
I'll say 2 things about what difference it makes from the point of view of the buy side. The first difference it makes is that you all go from competing really at the bottom in programmatic at the bottom of that pyramid of needs, right? On scale, on efficiency, on transparency, and I think we all now understand, in fact, and in theory, that is not a good place for premium publishers to compete. There's insufficient room to differentiate there or to deliver the real value of the trust and engagement that you've built with your audiences over time. So the closer we get to competing on the top part of that pyramid of needs, the better news it is for premium publishers, and we see that in our results. So dollars which today skew to today, by the way, when fishing in the long tail of high frequency, what's most important is the inventory be affordable. And we see our spend move that way in lots of ways. When we're up there competing on precision and on outcomes, and when we're getting real access to your audiences on that basis, we see spend skewing back towards premium settings where there's better engagement, better recall, where that ad will actually drive an outcome over time. And that's where we all want this market to be. Again, is one where we can all be proud of the impact that the advertising is driving for marketers over time.
Posture's a market for mass migration of brand dollars. How do we pave the road and create the foundation for product launches to run through premium programmatic channels in a guaranteed way across the most premium publishers in our space? The future relies on technology. We use it in all areas of our lives. I think we should almost abandon the word programmatic and just think about this as let's use the latest technology available to create more efficient digital media transactions. I think we stopped calling them smartphones. We just call them phones now. Programmatic pigeonholed simply because the decision is made in real time at the time of request if this user is going to, it's a yes or no. But we need to kind of move past that as this programmatic thing is a niche thing and just move towards this is the latest technology available and let's power our business using it. And one last thing I'll say before you have some closing remarks is about a year ago I went into Mike Smith's office and I told him that that thing that you use to sell your unsold impressions, programmatic component of your business, I want you to take that and I want you to put it first. And I want you to give me 100% access to the inventory for you to be able to source guaranteed buyer-intended audiences through premium programmatic products. And after I picked him up off the floor, we had a longer conversation about how this strategy could really revolutionize the way that sales teams, publisher sales teams, think about programmatic. And he was client number one for us at the very left side of that bell curve for the diffusion of innovation. So we're incredibly grateful for the relationship with Hearst. They've obviously given us a great space here and have promoted the product and the brand and the effort. So thank you, Mike. I see you over there. Appreciate you and everything you've done for Sonobi. And if you have any last words or...
I was promised brutal Q&A, so I'm going to save it.
I did. I promised you that. All right, let's hear it. Questions for us? We're going to get off easy, I think.
Somebody in the sun has got a question there.
Hi, Gretchen Brandt from Vila Media.
Hi.
One of the knocks or comments about the programmatic industry so far has been it's just facilitating a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
I'm sure you feel that's unfair, or maybe not. If it is unfair, tell us why.
It's extraordinarily unfair. MediaMath is happy to pay 3, 4, 5 times the price point for an impression if the buyer's intended against it, if they can get it first, and if they can get scale against it. I think the way programmatic has been made available to the companies has sort of forced them into this area where they're building technology to find those high-value audiences with the resources that they have available. The first step, I think, is enabling access, and you will see really a totally different side from a company like a MediaMath when you do that.
I would only add, our eCPM has doubled every year for the past 3 years. What are we paying for media? Globally, doubling year on year. We started from a low base, right? And anybody who is out here making a living on $12 and $20, CPM direct sales, we didn't start down there. We started at the other end of the spectrum. So, all we can do is double every year. And I think this conversation to us is about, getting access to the next level of experiences and inventory that our clients are willing to pay for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you speak a little bit more to the prerequisites? Because you guys are very eloquent in how you talk about what a publisher should be looking at from the supply side. But you neglect, or at least seemingly overlook, in this discussion, the prerequisites, right? In talking about understanding an audience, there's a lot of prerequisites.
Sure.
In understanding the ad server and the prioritization in the ad server,
Sure.
I mean, you're implying that this is a middleware that supersedes the decisioning of the ad servers, and there's a prerequisite then for that. So could you talk a little bit more about those prerequisites?
Prerequisite.
This one's for you.
Thank you for that. Prerequisite. So understanding the audience. When I say that, I mean understanding the value of your audience. So you very clearly understand what an impression would cost on the homepage of cosmopolitan.com. You have a rate card for that, but you don't understand what you should be selling individual users for. So there's a couple ways that we can illuminate that for you. One is with a piece of technology we call reactive segmenting, which measures MediaMath's bid intention against your audience. So we could show you quite visually that this individual set of users that you may want to sell through a sell-side first-party data segment, or you may want to guarantee to a buyer's first-party data segment is worth X, and you shouldn't sell it for less. So giving you the tools to manage your audience like you manage your impressions. You define that rate card for the impressions, but the market defines the rate card for your users. And we want to give you the tools to understand what that rate card is as it's rolling. And your second question was around the ad server. Prioritization inside the ad server is incredibly difficult. You've got high sell-through rates on contextual 970 by 250 units. How do you prioritize an audience-based deal there? Part of what we're trying to do, since we have the luxury of being on your page, we have the insights of the buyer's audience and how they visit your site and how frequently they visit your site. So we can, for you, forecast through a futures scenario saying these users convert into X amount of impressions per month, and you should book them in this way inside of your ad server. The whole technology is predicated on sort of solving those two things and giving you the decisions of whether or not you want to do that or you don't want to do that. Was that useful?
Yep.
Okay.
Given today's conversation with regards to premium programmatic, how do you reconcile the difference between an open exchange and a waterfall with first look, second look, so on and so forth?
Yeah. I would liken that to the reason the SSP was born. When we used to waterfall third-party ad networks, we got smart and said we got to stop doing that. You know, $2 passing back to $1.50, passing back to $1. And losing all that inventory along the way. I think you need more of a horizontal solution. Waterfall is a nasty word at Sonobi. We want you to be able to manage your audience in sort of a horizontal manner where the user shows up, where does he go? Waterfalling private marketplace deals where it's I'll take 15%, pass back into the ad server, and then the next thing, maybe that by the time that second private marketplace deal sold, you know, by the time it's served, it could have got extraordinary access if it was served first, and you don't know that. So we do the best we can, and waterfalling is a strategy to get it done. We're trying to just build you a better mousetrap to do that more efficiently. Is that useful? Okay, I'll take kind of.
I'm going to add something at the risk of being only a little more helpful.
I'll just clarify. The use of first look, second look sort of implies a waterfall, which is counter to the focus of an open exchange, right? So if I have first look with a certain price, with a certain amount of impressions, that could have competed against all the other bidders in an open exchange.
Why can't you give 3 people first look?
That's a good
As
point.
long as the audience doesn't overlap, you can, right?
Fair enough.
Okay,
fair
so
enough.
that's the tool that we're trying to give you, a horizontal integration with first look.
Okay, good clarification.
Did you have?
No, I'm glad I did.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi. To piggyback on the second last question, it's kind of asking a lot for publishers to get them to move, change their behavior and put your tag directly on page.
Yes, sure.
And have them forward any remaining inventory into DFP.
Yes.
So, one, can you explain to a public, make it simpler, why I can't just prioritize you highest in my waterfall in DFP and achieve the same result? 2, if I do make this behavioral change, what kind of fill rate am I going to get? Is it really going to be worth my time to have this? And say a lot of other people start doing this, where's the demand actually coming from? Is it coming purely through MediaMath, or are you also going to agencies and advertisers direct and adding their own demand in there as well?
Many facets to that question. Why can't I put it first and pass back? I think we've seen Xaxis approach the market with a solution like that. Take my tag, put it in the top of the ad server, and they'll fill a certain percent and then pass it back into the waterfall. for the reasons that I just mentioned, there are multiple deals within that first look that you could manage if you understood the insight of how you should. So all those users, those say 3 million users that would be sold programmatically, you want to prioritize access to them. You just don't want to give first look because then only the highest winning bid would win. You want to have the ability to guarantee audience and say, I can do this, I can do this, and I can do this. And that gives your publisher sales team the flexibility to deliver programmatic ad products. So if I just went first look and took open market indirect demand, yeah, we could get you decent fill and performance would be better. And that's a solution, but I think that's one of the solutions in the 4 pillars that we're trying to solve for. First look is not enough. First look performs better. We know that for sure, but that's not the marketplace that we're trying to build. It's not a pure first look marketplace with one buyer that wins and then it goes waterfalls down your ad server. You had some other components to that question.
Fill rate and demand sources.
Fill rate, I can't quote you on that. Don't know. Demand sources, yes, MediaMath and others. Most of the DSP layer, I would say, I don't want to offend anyone in the audience or our existing partners, but MediaMath would sort of be in a separate class where they are willing to pay and bring in a separate profile of demand specifically for this separate profile of supply. The goal is to enable agencies, trading desks. I need you to be able to sell your inventory to whoever you want in an agnostic way, and we want to provide that service for you. We just don't want to get too far ahead of the market.
Let me just give you an example of one of the things that's exciting about this to us that probably doesn't sound like a classic DSP buy, and I think maybe that'll help. As we've worked with Sonobi the last 6 months, we're really bidding in real time. It's quite familiar to us. The results have been great. Now we're talking about going back to our clients and saying, that first-party audience we were able to get for you, how about doing a guaranteed buy against them, 4 months out with guaranteed reach and frequency against ComScore 200 publishers, timed with the release of your new product. So let's do real product launch in this thing. Let's do premium buys with all the characteristics that you know and love. You define the audience. And we are able together in time to size that audience today, to forecast it for the pub, to issue a guarantee, to traffic it appropriately that we can know it'll deliver when it shows up. That's still just MediaMath demand, but I think it starts to get quite different than the first thing you think of when you think of DSP demand.
Saved by the bell.
All right.
Thanks, guys.